My name is Сэм Вакнин, and I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. What happens when the narcissist fails to secure or to obtain sufficient narcissistic supply? Well, the narcissist then reacts very much as a drug addict would react to the absence of his or her particular drug of choice. You see, the narcissist constantly consumes, or one could say preys upon, adoration, admiration, approval, applause, attention, and other forms of narcissistic supply. When lacking or deficient, the narcissistic's deficiency dysphoria sets in, kind of depression. The narcissist then appears to be down, depressed. His movements slow down. His sleep patterns are disordered. He either sleeps too much or becomes insomniac. His eating patterns change. He begins to gorge on food or avoids it altogether. When narcissistic supply is insufficient or deficient, the narcissist is constantly dysphoric. He is sad. He is unhedonic. He finds no pleasure in anything, including his former pursuits, hobbies, and interests. He is subjected to violent mood swings, mainly rage attacks, and all his visible and painful efforts at self-control discernibly fail. The narcissist may compulsively or ritually resort to an alternative addiction: alcohol, drugs, reckless driving, pathological gambling, or show populism. These are all substitutes for love and substitutes for narcissistic supply. And this gradual disintegration is the narcissist's futile effort both to escape his predicament, the lack of narcissistic supply, and to sublimate his aggressive urges. His whole behavior seems constrained, artificial, and effortful. The narcissist gradually turns more and more mechanical, robotic, detached, and unreal. His thoughts constantly wander or become obsessive and repetitive. His speech may falter or become slurred. He appears to be far away, in a world of his own making, of his narcissistic fantasies, where narcissistic supply is aplenty. When he cannot secure supply in the real world, the narcissist retreats into a fantasy world. He withdraws from his painful existence, where others fail to appreciate his greatness, his special skills, his talents, his potential, his achievements. The narcissist thus ceases to bestow himself upon a cruel universe, punishing the universe for its shortcomings, its inability to realize how unique the narcissist is. When narcissism thus fails as a defense mechanism, the narcissist develops paranoid persecutory delusions, self-directed confabulations which place him at the centers of other people's allegedly malign attention. The narcissist becomes his own audience and self-sufficient as his own, sometimes exclusive, source of narcissistic supply. And so the narcissist withdraws from the world, becomes a hermit, goes into a schizoid mode. He isolates himself, a monk in the kingdom of his own pain, agony, and hurt. He minimizes his social interactions and uses messengers and couriers to communicate with the outside. Devoid of energy, the narcissist can no longer pretend to succumb to social conventions. His former compliance gives way to open withdrawal, a rebellion of sorts, although no defiance. Smiles are transformed to frowns. Courtesy becomes rudeness. Emphasized etiquette is used as a weapon, an outlet of aggression, an act of violence. The narcissist, blinded by pain, seeks to restore his balance, to take another sip of the narcissistic nectar that is narcissistic supply. And in this quest, the narcissist turns both to and upon those nearest to him. His real attitude emerges. For him, his nearest and dearest are nothing but instruments, tools, one-dimensional, venues of gratification, sources of supply, pimps of such supply, catering to his narcissistic lust. Having failed to procure for him his drug, narcissistic supply. The narcissist regards friends, colleagues, and even family members as dysfunctional, frustrating objects. In his wrath and rage, he tries to mend them by forcing them to perform again, to function, to obtain for him narcissistic supply. It rarely works, because this is coupled with merciless self-flagellation, a deservedly self-inflicted punishment. Also, at least, the narcissist feels. In extreme cases of deprivation, when the narcissist has absolutely no access to any form of narcissistic supply, the narcissist entertains suicidal thoughts and ideation. And this is how deeply he loathes himself and his dependence on narcissistic supply. Throughout this extremely agonizing anguish process, the narcissist is beset by a pervading sense of malignant nostalgia, harking back to a past which never existed, of course, except in the narcissist's thwarted fantastic grandiosity, but he harks back to a past where narcissistic supply was everywhere. The longer the lack of narcissistic supply, the more the narcissist glorifies, rewrites, misses, and mourns this absolutely imaginary past. This nostalgia serves to enhance other negative feelings, amounting to clinical depression. The narcissist proceeds to develop paranoia. He concocts a prosecuting and persecuting world, incorporating in it his life's events and his social milieu. And this gives meaning, this paranoia, this conspiracy theory, gives meaning to what is erroneously perceived by the narcissist to be a sudden shift from oversupply to no supply. These theories of conspiracy, or conspiracies, account for the decrease in narcissistic supply. The narcissist says, I'm not getting supply because people are against me. The narcissist then, frightened, in pain, in despair, embarks upon an orgy of self-destruction intended to generate alternative supply sources. Attention, at any cost. The cost of being feared, the cost of becoming infamous, notorious, the cost of ruining himself. The narcissist is poised to commit the ultimate narcissistic act, self-destruction in the service of self-aggrandizement. When deprived of narcissistic supply, both primary and secondary, the narcissist feels annulled, hollowed out, mentally disemboweled, disintegrating like a cloud of molecules. And this is an overpowering sense of self-evaporation. These atoms of terrified anguish helplessly, inexorably melting into the background, becoming invisible. Without narcissistic supply, the narcissist crumbles like the zombies or the vampires one sees in horror movies. It is a terrifying sight to behold, and the narcissist will do anything to avoid it. Think about the narcissist as a drug addict. His withdrawal symptoms are identical. Delusions, physiological effects, irritability, emotional lability. In the absence of regular narcissistic supply, narcissists often experience brief, decompensatory psychotic episodes. It's that bad. This also happens while in therapy or following a life crisis accompanied by a major narcissistic injury. These psychotic episodes may be closely allied to another feature of narcissism, magical thinking. Narcissists are like children in this sense. Many, for instance, fully believe in two things: that whatever happens, they will prevail, and that good things will always happen to them. It's kind of magical cloak immunity. It is more than mere belief in the case of the narcissist. Narcissists just know it to be true, the same way one knows about gravity, directly, immediately, assuredly. The narcissist believes that no matter what he does, he will always be forgiven, always prevail and triumph, always come on top. The narcissist is therefore fearless in a manner perceived by others to be both admirable and callously insane. He attributes to himself divine and cosmic immunity. He cloaks himself in it. It renders him invisible to his enemies and to the powers of evil. Of course, it's a childish phantasmagoria, but to the narcissist, it's very real. The narcissist knows with religious certainty that good things will always happen to him. With equal certitude, the more self-aware narcissist knows that he will squander his good fortune time and again, and that's a painful experience, best avoided. So, no matter what serendipity or fortuity, what lucky circumstance, what blessing the narcissist receives, he always strives with blind fury to deflect them, to deform them, and to ruin his own chances. The narcissist is his own biggest enemy, and that is the cosmic joke, the irony of it all. While looking outside in a fit of paranoia, the real danger lurks inside.
Okay, Bubot and Bubim. I'm back and I have a surprise for you. Minnie is back. I don't know where she has been and what she has been up to, but we have a don't ask, don't tell policy. So I'm glad she's here. She's always so warm and soothing. Okay, Shoshanim, today we are going to discuss collapse. What happens to the narcissist when he is utterly unable to obtain supply? No matter what he does, no matter what he tries, no matter where he goes, no matter who he communicates with, he fails to obtain supply. What happens then? How does the narcissist experience his inability to obtain supply? What are the internal dynamics? We know that the narcissist disintegrates, a process known as narcissistic collapse. But what is the subjective experience of this collapse? Does the narcissist feel bad? Is he capable of remorse? Are there any long-term changes in the narcissist's personality, traits, behaviors, and interpersonal interactions? Stay tuned, and you'll have the answers to all these questions and many more besides. But how can I start any video without a diatribe? Again, my target is the self-styled experts online with and without academic degrees. Most of them misuse the term failed narcissist. Failed narcissism is a stage in childhood development. It was coined by Grotstein, who was a psychoanalyst. Grotstein used the term failed narcissism to describe the child's failure to attain a narcissistic personality structure. The abused and traumatized child, the instrumentalized and parentified child, tries to become a narcissist in order to fend off shame and hurt. And when the child fails, he becomes a failed narcissist, also known as emotionally dysregulated borderline. Rothstein said that borderlines are failed narcissists. So, when the adult narcissist fails to obtain supply, is defeated, is exposed, is shamed and humiliated and excommunicated, etc., or imprisoned, and so on, that's not a failed narcissist. That's a collapsed narcissist. The correct term is collapsed narcissist. Second thing, there is no type constancy in narcissism. A cerebral can become a somatic can become a cerebral, an overt often becomes covert, and a covert becomes overt. The narcissist would do anything to secure narcissistic supply, including changing types, type inconstancy. So it's very important to understand that narcissism is not a stable personality structure, and that narcissists transition via collapse to other types. So when the overt narcissist collapses, cannot obtain supply, he may try to become a covert narcissist. When the cerebral narcissist fails to obtain supply, for example, he doesn't have enough views, on his YouTube channel, he may become somatic in order to garner supply from sexual conquests, type inconstancy. This process is known as type reversion. So narcissists oscillate and vacillate between types, and when type reversion fails, it leads to narcissistic mortification, decompensation, and the emergence of a borderline-like personality with emotional dysregulation and mood lability. I encourage all of you to watch my videos on narcissistic mortification. This was a phrase first coined in 1957, 4 years before I was born, but it's more relevant than ever. Narcissistic mortification. As one source of narcissistic supply dwindles, the narcissist finds himself trapped in a frantic, though at times unconscious, but in a frantic effort to secure alternatives to the vanishing supply. As one pathological narcissistic space is rendered uninhabitable, the narcissist wanders off to find or to establish another pathological narcissistic space. Again, I encourage you to watch my videos on pathological narcissistic space. The pathological narcissistic space is the narcissist's stomping grounds, his haunts, his dives, where he goes to obtain supply. It's usually a physical location. But when too many people see through the narcissist, manipulation and machinations and scheming and cunning, when too many people are onto the narcissist, or when they're simply tired with the narcissist and his insatiable demands for narcissistic supply, then the pathological narcissistic space becomes dysfunctional and uninhabitable, and the narcissist moves on. These are all cataclysmic and traumatic events in the life of the narcissist, because narcissistic supply is the glue that holds the narcissist personality, for whatever it's worth, holds it together. It's anyhow disorganized. Some people say, some scholars say, that narcissistic personality is more disorganized than even borderline personality. Kernberg was of this opinion. And so it's anyhow chaotic and disorganized. Narcissistic supply, holds everything together. This precarious house of cards. When supply is absent, everything threatens to crumble and fall apart. And these hysterical endeavors to try to find substitute supply sometimes lead to boom-bust cycles, a little like Wall Street. These cycles involve, in the first stage, the formation of what I call a grandiosity bubble. Grandiosity bubble is a self-contained space. I will discuss it in a minute. Within this space, within this bubble, the narcissist supplies himself. He is unable to obtain supply from other people. His sources of supply had abandoned him. He is alone. And so his only source of supply is himself. And this is called self-supply. I have several videos analyzing the process of self-supply. Long-term self-supply can lead to what I call binary narcissism, the emergence of covert and overt structures, processes, behaviors, traits, cognitions, and emotions, overt and covert, in the same person. And of course, this creates enormous conflict and enormous dissonance. I have a few videos dedicated to binary narcissism. Just go to the search function on my YouTube channel. It's designated by the magnifying glass. Click on the magnifying glass and type binary narcissism, narcissistic mortification, self-supply, and you will be instantly gratified in the best Vacnin tradition. Back to grandiosity bubble. When the narcissist fails to obtain supply, as I said, he creates a grandiosity bubble. Grandiosity bubble is an imagined, self-aggrandizing narrative involving the narcissist and elements from the narcissist's real life. People around him places he frequents, conversations he is having. The narcissist weaves a story, incorporating these facts, inflating them in the process, and endowing them with bogus internal meaning and consistency. In other words, the narcissist confabulates, and he believes his own confabulations. That's why I keep saying narcissists never lie. They believe their prevarications. But this time the confabulation is loosely based on reality. In the process of inflating the grandiosity bubble, the narcissist reinvents himself and his life to fit the newfangled tale. He recasts himself in newly adopted roles. He suddenly fancies himself, I don't know, an actor, an author, a guru, a political activist, a narcissism expert, an entrepreneur, or an irresistible hunk, just like me. He modifies his behavior. Narcissist tries to conform to these new storytelling elements, to this new script, and to his new functions. He gradually morphs, shapeshifts into the fabricated character, and he becomes the fictitious protagonist that he has just created. All the mechanisms of pathological narcissism are at work during the bubble inflation phase. The narcissist idealizes the situation. He idealizes the other actors in the play, a process known as co-idealization. He idealizes the environment. Everything is ideal and fantastic. The narcissist tries to control and manipulate his milieu into buttressing his false notions and perceptions. Faced with an inevitable grandiosity gap, the gap between his imagination, his fantasy, and reality, faced with this gap, the narcissist becomes disillusioned, bitter. He devalues and discards people, places, and circumstances involved in the bubble, and the bubble deflates. Inflation, deflation is the narcissist equivalent of idealization devaluation. The narcissist self-supplies within the bubble. He inflates the bubble, that's the idealization phase, and then the bubble deflates, faced with the onslaught of reality. The bubble doesn't hold, it breaks apart, which is the equivalent process to devaluation. And still, grandiosity bubbles are not a part of the normal narcissistic mini-cycle. Grandiosity bubbles are rare events. They are much like trying on a new outfit for size and comfort. Grandiosity bubbles fizzle out rapidly, and the narcissist reverts to his regular pattern, idealizing new sources of supply, devaluing and discarding these sources, pursuing the next victims to be drained of all life. Actually, the deflation of a grandiosity bubble is met with relief by the narcissist. It does not involve a narcissistic injury. The narcissist views the bubble as merely an experiment at being someone else for a while. It is a safety valve, allowing the narcissist to effectively cope with negative emotions and frustration. And so cleansed, cathartically, the narcissist can go back to doing what he does best, projecting a false self and garnering attention from others. Narcissists are addicts, they're junkies. They're addicted to narcissistic supply, and they react with depression, paranoia, and schizoid withdrawal to the absence or deficiency of supply. Narcissists decompensate, act out, experience brief psychotic episodes when they're deprived of narcissistic supply in the long term. And many narcissists resort to self-delusion, unable to completely ignore reality, contrarian opinions, countervailing information and data. The narcissist transmutes these things. Unable to face the dismal failure that he is, the narcissist partially withdraws from reality. To soothe and salve the pain of disillusionment and disenchantment, the narcissist administers to himself a mixture of lies, distortions, half-truths, and outlandish interpretations of events around him. And then he goes on to believe all these things. The narcissist when he is faced with dwindling, vanishing narcissistic supply, adopts one of several solutions. And I'm going to describe these solutions to you. One of the main problems in narcissism is that it is an extremely variegated phenomenon. It's very difficult to put all narcissists in one basket. Narcissists, for example, when they are faced with a lack of supply, choose different solutions, and these solutions are diametrically opposed to each other. They're mutually exclusive. So it looks as if some people are narcissists and some people are not, even when they are. And here are the solutions. The first one is the delusional narrative solution. Remember, these are the solutions the narcissist adopts, having tried to obtain supply in a classical way from sources of supply and failed, a process known as collapse, having tried the grandiosity bubble and failed, having attempted self-supply and failed, having experienced mortification, narcissistic mortification, and then unable to cope with the life-threatening mortification, the narcissist withdraws from reality. He develops solutions. One of them is the delusional narrative solution. The narcissist constructs a narrative in which he figures as the hero and the protagonist. In this narrative, he is brilliant, perfect, irresistibly handsome, destined for great things, entitled, powerful, wealthy, the center of attention. In short, he is Сэм Вакнин. The bigger the strain on this delusional charade, the greater the gap between fantasy and reality, the more the delusion coalesces and solidifies. Finally, if it is sufficiently protracted, long time, the delusion replaces reality, and the narcissist's reality test deteriorates to the point of delusional disorder or even psychotic disorder. The narcissist withdraws his bridges and becomes schizotypal, even catatonic or schizoid. The Swedish had described a post-traumatic stress disorder syndrome very similar to this. Now, the next solution is the antisocial solution. Again, I'm reminding you, these are solutions to collapse, to an inability to obtain supply, never mind what the narcissist tries to do. Maybe people around the narcissist are no longer available to provide him with supply. Maybe they are too angry at him, disillusioned with him. Whatever the case may be, he cannot obtain supply. So the first solution is to become delusional, but the second solution is to become antisocial. The narcissist renounces reality in this solution to his mind. Those who pusillanimously fail to recognize his unbound talents, innate superiority, overarching brilliance, benevolent nature, entitlement, cosmically important mission, perfection, etc. Those who are too lowbrow and too inferior to grasp his superiority, they don't deserve consideration. They are subhuman. He holds them in contempt. The narcissist's natural affinity with the criminal and with the psychopath, his lack of empathy and compassion, his deficient social skills, his disregard for social mores and morals and laws and rules, his defiance, his reactance, they now erupt and blossom. The narcissist becomes a full-fledged antisocial psychopath, in effect, a primary psychopath. He ignores the wishes and needs of other people. He breaks the law. He violates all rights and boundaries, natural and legal. He holds people in contempt and disdain. He derides and decries society and its codes. He punishes the ignorant ingrates who refuse to provide him with supply. And that, these people, to his mind, drove him to this state. They are responsible. They deserve what's coming. He acts criminally. He jeopardizes the safety, lives, and property of these people because they deserve every conceivable punishment for having pushed him to this particular corner. That's the antisocial solution. Another solution is the paranoid schizoid solution. Again, when the narcissist collapses, everything failed, grandiosity bubbles, self-supply, other people's supply, pathological narcissistic space, all the devices and mechanisms and stratagems don't work anymore. For some reason, the narcissist becomes much less self-efficacious. He is unable to extract narcissistic supply from his environment, and the grandiosity gap has grown to the point of intolerability. It's unbearable. At that point, the narcissist adopts solutions. One of them is a delusional solution. Other solution is to become essentially criminalized. The third solution is the paranoid schizoid solution. When narcissism fails as a defense mechanism, the narcissist develops paranoid narratives, self-directed confabulations which place the narcissist at the center of other people's allegedly malign attention and intention. People or institutions are persecuting him. The narcissist becomes his own audience, and he is self-sufficient as his own, sometimes exclusive source of narcissistic supply. The tales he is telling himself, the tales of persecution, the tales of abnegation, the tales of pursuit and chase by malevolent, malign, malicious institutions and individuals who are envious of him or afraid of him, these tales are actually his narcissistic supply. Paranoia or paranoid ideation is actually a form of narcissism because it places the paranoid at the center of attention. It's a form of grandiosity. The narcissist develops persecutory delusions. He perceives slights and insults where none are or were intended. He becomes hypervigilant. He becomes subject to ideas of referential ideation. He believes that people are gossiping about him, mocking him, prying into his affairs, violating his privacy, cracking his email, hacking his accounts. The narcissist is convinced that he is the center of malign and malintentioned attention. People are conspiring to humiliate him, punish him, abscond with his property or ideas, delude him, impoverish him, confine him physically or intellectually, censor his speech, impose on his time, force him to action or to inaction, frighten him, coerce him, surround and besiege him, change his mind, part with his values, victimize him, or even murder, assassinate him. These delusions are self-generated. They don't require any support and any evidence. They're not evidentiary. And so this self-generation of delusions, persecutory delusions, paranoid ideation, that's a supply. It's a form of malignant, cancerous self-supply. Paranoid narcissists who had chosen settled on the paranoid schizoid solution, refrain from meeting people, from falling in love, from having sex, from talking to others, or even from corresponding with others. Their lives are constricted. They limit themselves more and more to a single physical space and a single type of interaction, which is minimal. In short, these narcissists become schizoids, not out of social shyness, and not because of the general motivation of the schizoid, a lack of interest in people, but out of what they feel to be their choice. This evil, hopeless world does not deserve me, goes the inner refrain of this kind of narcissist. I shall waste none of my time and resources on this ungrateful environment. And the narcissist convinces himself that his survival depends on withdrawing from the world. This is the paranoid schizoid solution. But there's another type of paranoid solution. Again, these are solutions to deficient narcissistic supply. The other type of paranoid solution is the paranoid aggressive or explosive solution. Some narcissists who have developed persecutory delusions, they are already paranoid, they have paranoid ideation. They resort to an aggressive stance, a more violent resolution of their internal conflict. These kind of narcissists become verbally, psychologically, situationally, and rarely physically abusive. They insult, castigate, chastise, hector, berate, demean and deride and decry their nearest and dearest, and often other people who are well-wishers and loved ones. In extreme cases, they even direct this vitriol and diatribes at total strangers. These narcissists explode in unprovoked displays of indignation, righteousness, condemnation, and blame. Theirs is an exegetic bedlam. They interpret everything, even the most innocuous, inadvertent, and innocent comment, as designed to provoke and humiliate them. Their hypervigilance leads directly to paranoia, aggression, and violence. These narcissists sow fear, revulsion, hate, and malignant envy in everyone around them. They flail against the windmills of reality. They are a pathetic, forlorn sight, but often they cause real and lasting damage. Fortunately, mainly to themselves, unfortunately, very frequently also to others. Then there is a masochistic avoidance solution. The narcissist who chooses this solution, who selects for it, is angered by the lack of narcissistic supply. He directs some of this fury and frustration, aggression, inwards, punishing himself for his failure and defeat. This masochistic behavior has the added benefit of forcing the narcissist's closest, nearest, and dearest to assume the roles of dismayed spectators or of persecutors, either way, to pay him the attention that he craves. By molesting himself, by punishing himself visibly, by hurting himself, this kind of narcissist forces everyone around him to cater to his needs, to walk on eggshells, to become enablers, to collaborate with him. And this constant ambience of anxiety and fear and attention is the narcissistic supply. Self-administered punishment often manifests as self-handicapping masochism. It's a narcissistic cop-out. By undermining his work, his relationships, his efforts, the increasingly fragile narcissist avoids additional criticism and censure, negative supply. He transitions from overt to covert. Self-inflicted failure is the narcissist's doing. It is self-inflicted. The narcissist is in control of this process. It proves that he is the master of his own fate. I may have failed, but I made it happen. She may have cheated on me, but I pushed her to do that. Masochistic narcissists keep finding themselves in self-defeating circumstances, which render success impossible. Millon had written that this is a way to avoid an objective assessment of their performance to render it improbable. These narcissists act carelessly. They withdraw in mid-effort. They're constantly fatigued, bored, or disaffected, and they passively aggressively sabotage their own lives. Their suffering is defiant, in your face, visible, and by deciding to abort, they reassert their omnipotence because I have decided to abort. The narcissists pronounce in public misery, self-pity, sanctimonious self-righteousness. They are compensatory. Again, Millon wrote that these reinforce the narcissist's self-esteem against overwhelming convictions of worthlessness, and Masterson added shame. The narcissist's tribulations and anguish render the narcissist, in his own eyes, unique, saintly, virtuous, righteous, resilient, significant and holy. This is a form of self-generated narcissistic supply. It's a form of self-supply. All these solutions are forms of self-supply. And so paradoxically, the worse the anguish and the unhappiness, the more egregious the defeat and the failure, the more relieved and elated such a narcissist feels. He feels good only when he feels bad. So these are the solutions that narcissists opt for and select when they are faced with a dearth, with a lack or deficiency of narcissistic supply, and they have exhausted all the means to obtain supply. The narcissist reacts to his failure to obtain enough narcissistic supply very much as a drug addict reacts to the absence of his particular drug. The dwindling or absence of supply is a trauma. The narcissist experiences a kind of post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic reaction. The narcissist constantly consumes, he actually preys upon, adoration, admiration, adulation, approval, applause, attention, other forms of narcissistic supply, including negative forms of supply, notoriety, being feared. When lacking, when deficient, a narcissistic deficiency dysphoria sets in. It's a kind of mild depression, a little like dysthymia. The narcissist appears to be depressed. His movements slow down. His sleep patterns become disordered. He either sleeps too much or he becomes an insomniac. His eating patterns change as well. He gorges on food or he avoids it altogether. Some narcissists develop eating disorders. The narcissist is constantly dysphoric, sad, anhedonic. He finds no pleasure in anything, including his former pursuits, hobbies, and interests. The narcissist is subjected to violent mood swings, mainly rage attacks, and all his visible and painful efforts at self-control fail. Such a narcissist, faced with the catastrophic certainty of lack of supply, he catastrophizes. He anticipates never ever getting supply again. So he may compulsively and ritually resort to an alternative addiction. Alcohol, drugs, love, reckless driving, shopaholism. They're all substitutes for narcissistic supply. This gradual disintegration is the narcissist's futile effort both to escape his predicament and to sublimate his aggressive urges to render them socially acceptable. The whole behavior of the narcissist seems constrained, artificial, effortful. As the period of lack of narcissistic supply continues, as time goes on and he is unable to obtain supply, the narcissist gradually becomes more and more mechanical, detached, robotic, unreal, begins to resemble a schizoid in many ways. The thoughts of the narcissist constantly wander or become obsessive and repetitive. His speech may falter. He becomes a lot more dissociative, amnesiac. He appears to be far away in the world of his narcissistic fantasies, where narcissistic supply is aplenty and abundant. The narcissist withdraws from his painful existence, where other people fail to appreciate his greatness, special skills and talents, potential, or accomplishments. The narcissist ceases to bestow himself upon a cruel, rejecting universe, punishing the world for its shortcomings, its inability to realize how unique the narcissist is. Guntrick described it in the 60s as an interaction with an internalized bad object. When narcissism fails as a defense mechanism, the narcissist develops paranoid delusions, as I've mentioned, self-directed confabulations, which place the narcissist at the center of other people's alleged malign intentions. The narcissist becomes his own audience and self-sufficient as his own, sometimes exclusive source of narcissistic supply. And again, many narcissists go into a schizoid mode, narcissistic or schizoid withdrawal. Many narcissists isolate themselves, hermits in a kingdom of hurt and pain. This kind of narcissist minimizes his social interactions and uses messengers, go-betweens, to communicate with the outside. It's a vicarious form of existence by proxy, devoid of energy, depleted. The narcissist can no longer pretend to succumb to social conventions. His former compliance, his mask falls, and it gives way to open avoidance, a rebellion of sorts. Smiles are transformed into frowns. Courtesy becomes rudeness. Emphasized etiquette, a bit affected, is used as a weapon, as an outlet of aggression, as an act of social violence. The narcissist becomes a spectacle. Blinded by pain, he seeks to restore his balance, to take another sip of the narcissistic nectar. In this quest, the narcissist turns both to and upon people around him. His real attitude emerges. As far as a narcissist is concerned, his so-called nearest and dearest are nothing but tools, two-dimensional instruments of gratification, sources of supply, pimps of such supply, catering to his narcissistic lusts. I call this insignificant others. Having failed to procure for the narcissist his drug, having failed to garner for him narcissistic supply and sources of supply, the narcissist regards friends, colleagues, even family members as dysfunctional, frustrating objects. In his rage and wrath, the narcissist tries to fix these people by forcing them to perform again, to function. And this is coupled with a merciless self-flagellation, a deservedly self-inflicted punishment. The narcissist feels that he had failed, especially himself. His idealized self-image renders him a perfectionist. His standards can never be met. He sets himself up for failure. In extreme cases of deprivation, the narcissist entertains suicidal thoughts. And this is how deeply he loathes himself and his dependence on narcissistic supply. Throughout, the narcissist is beset by a pervading sense of malignant nostalgia, harking back to the past, actually to an imaginary past, to a fantastic past, which had never existed except in the thwarted fantastic grandiosity of the narcissist. The longer the lack of narcissistic supply, the more the narcissist glorifies, rewrites, reframes, misses and mourns this ostensible past. And this nostalgia serves to enhance other negative feelings, amounting to clinical depression. The narcissist proceeds to develop paranoia. He concocts a persecuting world, incorporating this worldview into his life's events and social milieu. It becomes an organizing and interpretative principle. It gives meaning to what is erroneously perceived by the narcissist to be a sudden shift from oversupply to no supply. And these conspiracy theories account for the decrease in narcissistic supply. He says, people envy me, people hate me, people avoid me because I'm superior. The narcissist is frightened, is in pain, is in despair. He can't hold himself together. He's falling apart. He's disintegrating. He's experiencing his own emptiness, this void, the howling void inside him, this hall of mirrors where no one is reflected. And so he embarks on an orgy of self-destruction intended to generate alternative supply sources, attention, at any cost. The narcissist is poised to commit the ultimate narcissistic act, self-destruction as a spectacle, self-annihilation and self-defeat in the service of self-aggrandizement. Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods. Hitler in the bunker is a prime example of this. When deprived of narcissistic supply, both primary and secondary, the narcissist feels annulled, hollowed out, mentally disemboweled. It's an overpowering sense of evaporation, disintegration into molecules of terrified anguish, helplessly, inexorably, ineluctably. There's nothing the narcissist can do about it. It's the ultimate, the consummate form of helplessness. Without narcissistic supply, the narcissist crumbles, not like a cookie, but like the zombies or the vampires one sees in horror movies. It is a terrifying process to behold, and even more terrifying to endure and experience. And the narcissist will do anything to avoid it. Mortification leads to this. Consider the narcissist. Think about the narcissist as a drug addict. His withdrawal symptoms are identical. It's the cold turkey of no supply. Delusions, physiological effects, irritability, emotional lability. In the absence of regular narcissistic supply, narcissists often experience brief, decompensatory psychotic episodes. And this also happens while in therapy or following a life crisis accompanied by a major narcissistic injury. The psychotic episodes may be closely allied to another feature of narcissism, magical thinking. Narcissists are like children in this sense, and not only in this sense. Narcissism, pathological narcissism in adulthood, as Freud had observed 110 years ago, is a form of infantile regression. Many, for instance, fully believe in two things. Many narcissists fully believe in two things. That whatever happens, they will prevail. In other words, they're immune to the consequences of their actions. And it's a kind of law of attraction. The universe is at their beck and call, and that good things will always happen to them. It is more than mere belief, actually. It's conviction. Narcissists just know that these things are true, the same way one knows about gravity, directly, immediately, and assuredly. And of course, this is very conducive to psychosis, to a divorce from reality. Impaired reality testing sometimes become no reality testing. The narcissist believes that no matter what he does, he will always be forgiven, always prevail in triumph, always come on top, and never pay the price. The narcissist is therefore fearless, in a manner perceived by others to be both admirable and insanely reckless. The narcissist attributes to himself divine and cosmic immunity. He cloaks himself in it like an invisibility cloak. It renders him invisible to his enemies and to the powers of evil conspiring against him. It is a childish phantasmagoria, but to the narcissist it's very real. The narcissist knows with religious certainty that good things will always happen to him. With equal certitude, the more self-aware narcissist knows that he will squander this good fortune time and again. And it's a painful experience, and it's best avoided, but it's inevitable. So no matter what serendipity or what fortuity, what lucky circumstance, what blessing the narcissist receives, what gifts is endowed with, he always strives with blind fury to undermine them, to deflect them, to deform and to ruin his chances, just in order to deceive himself that he is the master of his own fate, the engineer of his life, utterly and totally in control. The inevitable then becomes a choice that restores the inner generation of narcissistic supply, self-supply.
My name is Сэм Вакнин,
I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, and a series of other books and ebooks about personality disorders and other topics. I'm also a professor of psychology and a professor of finance in several universities. In October of this year, I'm going to publish a very long paper in a prestigious academic journal in the field of psychology. And in this paper, I'm going to make a claim which is bound to be controversial, because I never make claims that are not controversial. It's not fun. So this controversial claim is that all narcissists are both overt and covert. There's no type constancy. Narcissists oscillate between being overt and covert. And they do so in reaction to changing life circumstances, and especially to incidents of extreme narcissistic injury, leading usually to mortification. And so that's the first claim. And the second claim I'm going to make has to do with the behaviors of coverts who are predominantly classic. In other words, when the classic narcissist or overt narcissist becomes covert, he is not fully covert. There's a kind of subvariant of covert, which I call collapsed covert narcissist. Every personality disorder has a collapsed state. There's a collapsed narcissist. I have a video on this channel which deals with collapsed histrionics. There is a collapsed borderline. I will dedicate a video to this a bit later this week. And there is a collapsed covert narcissist. Now, this gives me the opportunity to teach you a useful tool. If anyone confuses failed narcissists with collapsed narcissists, they are not the experts they claim to be, and they don't know the first thing about narcissism. Failed narcissism is a phase in the development of borderline personality disorder. It was first discovered, suggested, and described by a scholar of great importance. His name was Grotstein, Grotstein. Grotstein. Grotstein said that borderlines are actually failed narcissists. As children, they had tried to develop narcissistic defenses in the face of extreme abuse and trauma, but they had failed. And instead, they remain exposed. They remain without a skin. They remain vulnerable to their own emotions and to pain emanating from the outside. And consequently, they become hypervigilant. They anticipate rejection and humiliation and abandonment. And they react with decompensation. They lose it. And they act out. They misbehave recklessly, defiantly, if they are antisocial. And so today we are trying to unify the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder and secondary psychopathy. But that's a topic that I've dealt with in at least 3 separate videos on this channel. Now, failed narcissism is a stage in development of borderline. When we talk about a narcissist who fails, a narcissist who does not succeed to obtain narcissistic supply on a regular, predictable, and repetitive basis, a narcissist with deficient narcissistic supply, that's not a failed narcissist. That's a collapsed narcissist. And any self-styled expert, with or without the title doctor, who confuses the two, simply never read the literature and is exactly that, a self-proclaimed wannabe expert. Be very careful. There are a lot of fakes out there, out for your money and nothing else. So, the collapsed narcissist, hitherto we thought that the collapsed narcissist simply goes through a phase of withdrawal, a schizoid phase, or becomes antisocial, becomes a bit psychopathic or delusional, reframes situations in a grandiose way, and so on and so forth. I'm suggesting that one of the main strategies of the collapsed classic narcissist is to become, for a while, a covert narcissist. He becomes a covert narcissist, and he, in this way, copes with his collapse. Now, this would mean that there is no type constancy, that every overt or classic narcissist can be covert, and essentially every covert can be overt. To test this hypothesis, I conducted 2 studies, and this is the paper that will be published in October. It's being peer reviewed right now. I conducted 2 studies. To remind you, I have the world's largest database of people diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And this database comprises 1,800 people. The first one in my database dates back to 1997. So it's a longitudinal database. It's very long. And I've also interviewed an average of 5 family members, colleagues, and so on of each of these narcissists. So the database in totality has something like 15,000 people. Now, each of these people had responded to a questionnaire comprised of 683 questions, modeled roughly on the MMPI-2. And so it's a database with a gigantic number of data points, and allows me to data mine at my leisure, using tools that are off the shelf, so statistical tools. So I conducted 2 studies. The first study, I simply data mined the database and found out the patterns of conversion from collapse to covert and back. And then I administered a questionnaire to close to 3,000 family members who had agreed to participate. About 70% of them women, 30% of them men. And I asked them a series of questions about how they had experienced this switching between overt or classic and covert. And I'm using the word switching very judiciously, because switching is how we describe the word that we use to refer to a change in personalities in multiple personality disorder, shifting from one personality to another, from one alternative personality to another in multiple personality disorder, today known as dissociative identity disorder. This shifting is called switching. And I think the narcissist switching from classic to covert is exactly a dissociative state. It's a self-state, exactly like borderline. In general, the picture emerging is that all these personality disorders are forms of multiple personality disorder. They all involve multiple self-states which approximate and are asymptotic to full-fledged personalities. And they all involve switching. So there I was with this, a majority of the 3,000, to my good surprise, responded. And now I had a complete picture of how people experience the narcissist when he switches from overt to covert, and I incorporated it in the paper. Now, in this particular video, I don't want to be too academic or too dry. Maybe it's too late for this, and so on. And what I did instead, I had rewritten the paper with a first person pronoun. It's like I've rewritten the paper as though it were a personal testimony. Now, I am a classic, overt, malignant, psychopathic narcissist. So I am 99% of the time, I'm not covert. So the majority of what you're about to hear has nothing to do with me. Even though I will be using I, my, mine, most of it doesn't have anything to do with me, but it is a composite, a collage, an agglomeration, an aggregation of all the information provided in the 2 separate studies. Bear that in mind before you bombard me with comments about my personal life and so on and so forth. Some of it applies to me, of course. I have gone through covert states, I now realize, but the bulk of it describes hundreds of narcissists and their family, and thousands of their family members. So it's a valuable, I think, contribution to interpersonal dynamics within the experience of switching from overt to covert. First of all, when the overt becomes covert, he develops immediately conflict aversion. Conflict aversion is in every possible situation, in business, at work, with family members, in romantic or interpersonal relationships. Such narcissists would suddenly lose boundaries, not enforce boundaries. They will not fight for their rights. They will allow other people to pilfer their ideas. They will never protest. They will never take action. They will never fight back. They don't stand up for themselves. Not because they're cowards, but because of other reasons. So I asked these people, why don't you stand up for yourself when you become covert? What happens to you when you become covert? It's not a question of shyness or vulnerability or fragility. Because none of these have to do with not fighting back. It's a question of, it seemed to involve other psychodynamic processes and motivations. And this is what these people told me. I don't fight back, I don't protest or stand up for myself, not because I'm a coward, but because I am just, or because I'm practical, or because I'm indifferent, or because I'm grandiose. And I broke it down this way. Just. Many narcissists said, I cannot satisfy the emotional, sexual, or business needs, or whatever. I cannot satisfy needs. In the case of interpersonal relationships, I cannot satisfy the emotional and sexual needs of my women, so I have no right to set boundaries. I have no right to make demands or to enforce rules of conduct. I encourage women in my life to look after themselves and to outsource their needs. That's in interpersonal relationships. Same in the workplace or in business. I cannot provide the goods, so I encourage outsourcing. The second reason covert narcissists gave to becoming doormats, to becoming submissive, to becoming reticent, to withdrawing, to not fighting, to not standing up for themselves, to not enforcing their rights. The second reason was practical. Many narcissists said, there is no point in fighting back. Some of them said, my reputation is so short that no one will ever believe any of my claims or intentions, not even my so-called nearest, dearest, intimate friends and significant others. So for practical reasons, I'm not fighting back. And then there was a very big group, which we will focus on today, of narcissists who had switched from classic to covert. And they said that their character had changed. They became indifferent. They say, I easily switch off. I tune out. I repress. I dissociate. I reframe. I move on. I sometimes mind some things, but I never care about them. Everything and everyone becomes meaningless to me, imbued with no emotions. They were describing a process called dicathexis, imbued with no emotions. They admitted that, I'm quoting, this confuses people, especially women, and drives them to test me and to test my boundaries in an attempt to ascertain the extent of my involvement. But it doesn't work. I remain indifferent. And finally, some of them admitted that one of the reasons they're not fighting back is because they are grandiose. Fighting back means that I care. Caring is vulnerability. I don't want people to see that I care. Not caring is the ultimate form of personal strength. It enhances my feeling of omnipotence. So they're not fighting back. They're not imposing rules. They're not enforcing boundaries because they're grandiose. That's for the lesser mortals. It's not for them. So the only times switched covert narcissists, collapse covert narcissists, engage in conflict, is when they are afforded the opportunity to sadistically humiliate other people, preferably in public. Covert narcissists are very insidious, very pernicious, very subterranean, very passive-aggressive. And if they can't humiliate in public, they will. It gives them sadistic supply. So it is only then that they may suddenly come alive and erupt in conflict. And I focused in my study, I focused on the issue of sexual exclusivity. And the reason I chose the issue of sexual exclusivity in a dyad, in a couple, in an intimate interpersonal relationship, is that sexual exclusivity provokes our most primordial defensive instincts. Like if someone homes in or zeroes in on the woman with me, I would become an animal. I would be romantically jealous. I would act out. I may even become violent. Nothing provokes more basic reflexes, instincts, drives, urges, and reactions. Nothing, absolutely nothing, provokes more aggression than breach of sexual exclusivity. That's why people react to cheating, for example, with extreme trauma. So I decided to choose this because it combines the intellect, primordial, basic, primitive drives, the body and the mind. So it's like a package deal. And I focused on this, and I tried to see how the behavior of the overt or classic narcissist would change if he were to become a collapsed covert narcissist. So, and I'm going to use the first person singular, although I remind you that this is not about me. This is a composite or a collage of hundreds of testimonies by narcissists and thousands by their family members. As long as the sex continues, I enforce strict exclusivity, sexual exclusivity. When the sex ceases, or sexual attraction between us wanes or is absent, including owing to physical separation, she is not my woman any longer. Though she can be present in my life in other functions, she is not a woman to me. And I do not care. I'm not romantically jealous. I'm not possessive about sexual exclusivity any longer. I sometimes even encourage the woman in my life to be with other men in order to get rid of the relationship altogether or to transform it into a sexless companionship. Women interpret it, so now I'm drawing on the study of the family members. Women interpret it as proof that I do not care about them. They want to test me and my boundaries and to see if I would mind when they misbehave with other men, if I would impose and enforce rules and boundaries. Children do the same with their parents. We recreate our childhood with each other, of course. So the first sign of switching from classic narcissism to collapsed covert narcissist is losing interest. Losing interest, indifference. This indifference, I have described indifference within sexual, romantic, interpersonal relationship, but this indifference extends to all realms of life. And so I'm continuing with the collapsed covert narcissist. I have a feeling that I don't know how to be a man. I switch between hero, macho, all women be damned, and zero. Resistance is futile. Any passing male is more man than I am, and is going to beg and bed the woman in my life. And here I took experiences described by hundreds of narcissists, and I amalgamated them. I put them together as a first-person testimony. Men just walk to women who are with me, lovers, girlfriends, wives, and they pick them up in my presence. This is because when we are in public, I show zero interest in the woman with me, and I give no hint of intimacy of any kind with her. I ignore the woman completely, or if I pay any attention to the woman at all, it is briefly, just to mock and to berate her painfully. And this sometimes arouses the other man's savior, protective, damsel or princess in distress instincts. I've been told by men, you don't protect your women. Men talk to me about my women disrespectfully. Men don't respect me. They disrespect me. They misbehave with the woman who is with me. and they know it. But they think that I do not mind. They think I do not care. So they see an opportunity to take advantage of my sad and mad partners and of my blatant indifference. Showing an utter lack of interest is tantamount to communicating a license to proceed. It's like saying to the other man, you're not disrespecting or offending me by absconding with my woman. Go ahead. Go with her. Do with her whatever you want. When I make clear that their behavior bothers me, they explain, they apologize, they minimize, and they all stop immediately. And of course, this is a collapsed covert narcissist describing his behavior when he becomes a classic overt narcissist again. So the same narcissist can go through periods of total indifference, encouraging actually his woman or giving her license or giving other men license to misbehave, to sleep around, to cheat. And then suddenly, having switched back from collapsed covert narcissist to overt narcissist, to classic narcissist, he regains his sense of possessiveness, ownership, romantic jealousy, and he demands sexual exclusivity. It can be extremely disorienting. It's like two personalities. One could even argue these are two personalities. One of them doesn't care about sexual exclusivity at all, doesn't care about the intimate partner at all, is unable actually to have any kind of intimacy. And the other one is very possessive, very jealous. It's the same person. We are not talking about two people. We're talking about an overt classic narcissist who goes through a phase of collapse and becomes covert narcissist. These men don't take the woman away from me. They don't do anything against my will. They don't do anything against her will. I give up on the woman. I discard her publicly. And she wants the other men. There's no underhandedness. There's no coercion or expropriation. It's all out in the open with the full knowledge and consent of everyone involved. And so I cannot really claim innocence. I cannot say, I didn't know that they're going to have sex. I didn't know he was going to have sex with her. It is I who actually foretell, I foresee the sex, and I give them my assent and my assurance that I don't mind. I know that they're going to spend the night together. I know they're going to drink together. I know they're going on a vacation together. And I realize that when they get drunk or when they are isolated on an island in a vacation, and when she flirts with him shamelessly in my presence, I realize what's going to happen. I decline to force myself on them. I don't insist to join them. I don't insist, even when I'm invited. I withdraw. I withdraw and give them full freedom. I have only myself to so-called blame. Men don't abscond with my woman property. I give my woman to the men because I'm not interested in her in any way. This is the inner experience of a collapsed covert narcissist. He experiences indifference, whether it's real indifference or feigned indifference. It's an open question, because when the collapsed covert narcissist reverts to classic form, he experiences horrible pain, horrible agony over what had happened. So it's like he's leading himself to mortification. It's like in a classic narcissist, mortification leads to enlightenment and self-awareness. But in a covert narcissist, mortification leads to classic narcissism. Mortification is the way the covert narcissist awakens himself and becomes a full-fledged overt classic narcissist. And the classic narcissist, when he experiences mortification, he experiences self-awareness and then a covert phase. Mortification, therefore, is the bridge between overt and covert and back. That is the mechanism we have been missing. We've been racking our brains for the last at least 30 years, asking ourselves, how is it possible that an overt narcissist can become covert? They are such diametrically opposed types. How can a single individual be both? Well, through the process of mortification, which shuts down the false self for a while and allows the covert, indifferent, withdrawn, schizoid, self-effacing, passive-aggressive mode to emerge. Classic narcissist said, I'm immersed in interacting with a male company, trying to impress them. I usually meet in groups, so the role of the woman by my side is very unclear. Is she a hanger-on? Is she an admirer, a student, a guest, an estranged wife, an ex? Did we have a lover's quarrel? I leave that hanging in the air. I never protest when a man flirts with the woman next to me, when he picks her up. I give the impression that I couldn't care less, that I'm not bothered at all, that I have better, more important things to do than to get involved. In truth, I'm kind of afraid of confrontation. I feel weaker, much less of a man than the other men. I'm also certain that the woman will mock me and humiliate me in front of the other men and still abscond with him, still go with him. I don't have the power, I don't have the right to stop her. And that's already a classic narcissist. Actually, he's not aware, but he's describing a covert mindset. I never stand up for my woman. I never protect the woman in my life, even when I know that she is vulnerable, very drunk, unhappy, sad, depressed, or sick. Even when I know that the man she had picked up to spend the night with, or to have an affair with, is a dangerous man, a low-life scum, an alcoholic, a criminal, a junkie, a loser, a pedophile. I let the woman go with him. I let her get hurt. I don't care if my intimate partner is mocked, physically attacked, falls ill, is depressed, sexually assaulted, or needs me in any way, except if helping her generates narcissistic supply as a guru, a psychologist, an advisor, a wise man, a father figure. So this is a description of the transition back from covert to overt. We have the two sides. We are dealing with sexual exclusivity in interpersonal relationships, to remind you, because they evoke and provoke the most intense emotions. And these emotions are partly primitive, reptilian if you wish, and partly civilized, and partly intellectual, and partly bodily. There's no other realm of life which provokes this concoction. So that's why I decided to study this. And so many narcissists used a phrase that I invented, virtual single. They say, my women behave like virtual singles. In my presence, they always prefer to communicate with other men, aggressively pick them up, flirt with them, spend long stretches of time with them, days, sometimes whole nights, go to bars, go to nightclubs alone, and pick up men there. They have emotional affairs. They cheat repeatedly. They become so desperate that they signal to men in my presence. They give them their phone numbers. They flirt with them, even when they are having an evening out with me. They feel no real bond with me. They're starved for sex and intimacy, to be wanted, to be cherished. They feel used and abused by me. They want out by any means. They feel exploited. Cheating and ostentatious infidelity is their exit strategy, as you have said in your videos, writes one of them. By the way, this puts paid to the myth that narcissists are not self-aware. Had narcissists been totally not self-aware, processes like narcissistic injury and mortification would not have been possible. It would not have been possible to penetrate the narcissist's mind. It requires a modicum of standing outside yourself and looking at yourself, of introspection. The narcissist continues, when asked directly, the woman with me lets the other men know that I don't care, that I don't mind her misbehavior, and that I have no interest in her. I don't care about her whereabouts or who they're spending the time with or when and if they will return to me and how she chooses to act. The woman in my life is likely to say he's busy with his work, or he rejects and abuses me, he's very sick, he has mother issues, he told me I can sleep with others. I mean, they would use a variety, a panoply of excuses and explanations. Some of the narcissists feel this, experience the covert phase following the collapse, experience the covert phase as deeply humiliating. Men disrespect me completely and to my face for letting them have my women, in whom presumably I'm invested as my property. So they imply that I'm a doormat. Some of them say that I'm not involved in my intimate partner's life, and I don't involve her in mine, that I'm not human. Even men who admire and value what I have to give, intellect or contributions to business, or pity and mock me as a pompous fool, a deranged freak, a doormat, non-man in other realms of life. Okay, so this was an example of the collapsed covert's experience of indifference in a field, an area of life where we would have thought indifference is impossible, and that is interpersonal sexual exclusivity with his intimate partner. Even there, he is rendered totally indifferent. But this is an aspect and dimension of a larger phenomenon, which is a form of people-pleasing. And we must contrast people-pleasing with primary psychopathy. So many of the narcissists say, men have been taking away what's rightfully mine all my life. My time, my ideas, my money, my reputation, my history, my women, my contacts. Based on my indifference and collusion in this plunder, all men have reached two conclusions. One, as a people pleaser, I have no boundaries, no dignity, no self-respect, and no sanity. I'm defenseless. What they can do to me and to mine is limited only by their own pity, compassion, morality, and sense that there is nothing more to take, or that the maintenance cost is becoming too high. And this makes people in my life feel unsafe and unprotected, and makes my partner feel disillusioned. And the second conclusion that people reach when they observe the covert phase, the collapse covert phase, is that the person who is undergoing this switch is very mentally ill, utterly dysfunctional, incapable of maintaining even the rudiments of a relationship, or capable of having sex, gauge reality, or act in reality self-efficaciously, even if only to the extent of holding on to what's and whose his. So many narcissists describe the moment of loss, the moment where they had lost their spouse, their family, their money, their business, their freedom. They describe the moment of loss as intimately connected to a phase of mortification followed by collapsed covert narcissism. It is then, having been observed from the outside, that people got alarmed, got frightened, and walked away. Because it is then that the underbelly of the narcissist, the hidden black hole-like deep space void and darkness, the totally empty hall of mirrors, it is then that the non-existence, the absence of the narcissist in his own life and in his own mind became glaringly apparent. And it's a terrifying sight. It's like confronting an alien. And so most people just, they are deterred They walk back. They don't want anything to do with this kind of person. As long as the overt or the classic narcissist maintains the show, as long as the show goes on, there will be people charmed by him, succumb to his charisma, play along with his stratagems, collude, co-opt and collaborate with his plans, etc. As long as he keeps it together. But when he disintegrates and switches and transitions via the mortification bridge to a collapsed covert state, it is then that they see the true face of the narcissist. The nothingness, the absence. They see that there's no one there. It's the most terrifying experience. And so narcissists say, gradually everyone comes to regard me the same way, with a mixture of wariness, pity, revulsion, and contempt. Some are envious of my gifts and project their envy and their sense of guilt and shame for having abused me by becoming even more aggressive. They compensate. I mean, they feel guilty and ashamed. When they see the narcissist disintegrating, there's immediately an empathic reaction, like you feel bad. And some people feel guilty and ashamed. They feel that they had caused the disintegration. They pushed the narcissist over the edge. And even though it's a narcissist, and even though, it's a monster, they still feel bad. But some people, if they're immature, if they're narcissistic themselves, they would react to their own discomfort, to their own shame and guilt, with extended and enhanced aggression. The majority will just walk away, having squeezed the narcissist dry of any usefulness. Narcissists say, from time to time I try to fight back. But when I ask the narcissist in the sample to tell me how do they fight back? How do they extricate themselves? Like the Baron Munchausen, lifting themselves by their own hair? How do they extricate themselves from the pit, the cesspool of covert narcissism? How do they restore themselves back into an overt or classic state? I found out that they do it by conning people, cheating people, deceiving, making false promises, lying, or engendering a fantasy and then drawing people into the fantasy. For example, drawing women into the fantasy via the process of grooming. There's a series of videos I made about this, shared fantasy. So they con people, they cheat people out of money, out of love, out of compassion, they simply pretend to be who they are not. They assert themselves by taking instead of giving. And at that point, gradually they regain their classic narcissism, their overt narcissism. And suddenly, with the same intimate partner, they would make a new list of demands, boundaries, and rules, which include, for example, sexual exclusivity. Some narcissists said, even when I failed, I still tried to con people. But even there, as a con artist, I failed time and again. People saw right through me. People walked away. Women cheated on me repeatedly, their needs unmet. And the hope that I will set these people free, let them go, once they make me aware of their betrayals, that is the force that drove all of them. In other words, what this narcissist is saying is that when people discovered that he is conning them, that he's lying to them, that he's deceiving and cheating, they transgressed against him, they betrayed him, and they did it ostentatiously, openly, so that he would let them go. Conning people, said this narcissist, was setting boundaries for and asserting not myself, but the fictitious character that I had created for the con. So again, it defeated the purpose. Again, I ended up giving everything of myself freely to another entity, albeit an entity that I myself had conjured up. It's a very, very fascinating observation. This narcissist says that when he felt himself transitioning from classic through mortification to collapse, and from collapse to covert narcissism, he wanted to go back. He wanted to be classic again. And he felt that the only way he could do this is by conning people, cheating, deceiving, taking from them. So he tried to do this. But in order to do this, he had to come up with a fictitious figure, with a false self, with an act. And then he suddenly realized that whatever he's taking from other people, it's not he who does the taking. It's the false self. It's the invented character. It's the conjured up entity. It's again not him. Whoever is conning other people, deceiving them, cheating them, stealing from them, taking from them, it's not him. It's the character he had invented. Again, he has been usurped. Again, he has been replaced, displaced, and substituted for. And similarly, I make woman fall in love with a false apparition, an emanation, a thespian project, a role play, never with the real me. The grooming phase over, upon entering the shared fantasy, all my women discovered to their dismay that I had conned them into a relationship with a complete, abusive, and mentally disabled stranger, which is the real me. Of course, the most fervent wish of these women is to up and walk away by any and all means necessary, including by having casual sex with strangers ostentatiously. So, grooming is like making women fall in love, not with the narcissist or the psychopath, but with another person he had created, a facade, a Potemkin person, a fictitious entity. So they fall in love with this, and then they discover the real thing, the real McCoy, and they walk away. Again, by luring women into my lair, I am giving myself abundantly to another man. That other man is a fictitious character. In my case, for example, it's the irresistible genius. I am doing the dirty work of this fictitious man. I'm doing his dirty work for him. I'm satisfying his grandiose and sadistic needs to uphold and prove his irresistibility, and then to taunt, frustrate, humiliate, and despoil the women he captivates. Those are his needs, not mine. I dedicate all my resources to catering to these needs on his behalf. Again, there's a situation of exploitation and gullibility. Again, the real narcissist is not catered to, is not satisfied. Women in committed primary diets often complain to casual sex partners, to their dates, to their lovers, with whom they cheat. They often complain about their relationship and how its dysfunction is brought on the adultery. So in a typical classic relationship, women complain about the relationship. They say, well, the relationship is not working well. That's why, that's why I'm fornicating. That's why I'm cheating. But the intimate partners of the narcissist don't describe the relationship as the problem. They describe the narcissist as the problem. They actually like many elements in the relationship. They miss these elements. But there's no way they could countenance the narcissist himself. It's a mirror image of normal reality. In normal reality, you love the person you're with, but you're having difficulties in the relationship. When you're with a narcissist, you love some elements of the relationship. It's exciting, it's thrilling, it's adventurous, but you have serious problems with the person you're with. Something is seriously awry with the narcissist, which makes even the greatest rewards and gifts he can offer an incommensurate compensation. And so these are the only two modes the narcissist has: the doormat and the psychopath. The narcissist either goes through mortification and becomes a collapse covert, or he becomes a total antisocial psychopath. One of them is comatose, one of them is recessive, one of them is dominant at any given time. At some points, the narcissist becomes avoidant, celibate, and a con artist. At other points, he becomes a psychopath. At some points, and the psychopath micromanages the shared fantasy. At some points, the doormat is the one who is mortified. You remember that mortification leads from overt to covert and from covert to overt. And so sometimes the doormat is mortified. It's when we force two alternative self-states to encounter each other and to communicate. But even as the doormat continues to process the mortification, the psychopath continues apace with his exploits, forcefully dissociating the doormat in order to function. So when the overt transitions via collapse and mortification to the covert, when the covert transitions via collapse and mortification to the overt, there is a short period of dissociation where the dominant personality at that moment is fighting back, doesn't want to go away. So if you're covert, you're mortified, you're about to become overt, the covert will reassert himself. And if you're overt or psychopathic and you're mortified and you're about to become covert, you will become even more psychopathic and you will dissociate the covert. This is part of again, a bigger problem of delusionality. One of the main management problem in narcissism, both in therapeutic setting and for the narcissist himself, when he tries to manage his life, his cognitions, his emotions, is this delusionality. It's not only a lack of self-awareness, it's taking the information available and then reframing it in a way that supports grandiosity or other misconceptions. It's delusionality in the sense that the reality testing is impaired. The narcissist is divorced from reality at any time. And so, for example, in the vast majority of cases of narcissists, everyone who comes in contact with the narcissist shuns him and ultimately flees, runs away. I mean, look at, for example, Donald Trump. He's a president of the United States, but look how many hundreds of people have abandoned him already in the last 3 years. Men do it one way and women do it another, but all of them flee, all of them run away, all of them escape, all of them scatter, all of them don't want anything further to do with the narcissist, they shun him. Men don't mind or even relish being seen as assertive and decisive, so they just vanish or they tell the narcissist off. Women prefer to be thought of as sluts rather than heartless, traitorous bitches, so they cheat ostentatiously to get rid of the narcissist. So each gender has its own coping mechanisms and so on and so forth. If you're online, people will avoid the narcissist, like the virus of the mind, which can cause systemic infection. Even when people recover from exposure to the narcissist, there's always multiple organ long-term damage, like the COVID-19. But the narcissist doesn't see all this. Even if he is the greatest analyst to have ever lived, he's still totally blind to his own life and to interactions and people in his life. His compensatory grandiosity compels him to reframe everything counterfactually and delusionally. Let's take a few examples. Narcissists might tell you, everyone is addicted to me, everyone misses me horribly, and it is their loss that I'm out of their lives. And the reality is, people, especially women, can't wait to get away from the narcissist. They do anything, they do everything, they even go to extremes to set themselves free, to immediately go no contact with the narcissist, unless and until the narcissist can be of use. They proceed with their lives happily after the narcissist and profitably, and they decline the narcissist attempts to hoover or renew contact. And sometimes they do this aggressively and hatefully. And yet all of this doesn't affect the narcissist's perception that people are addicted to him, that they miss him, that they want him in their lives. And so the narcissist doesn't realize that it's 100% his loss that people flee and abhor him, having crossed paths with him. He doesn't realize this. I think it's their loss. And he's very traumatized. The reason for mortification is that he's traumatized. When he realizes that he can be humiliated, he can be made unsafe, even by non-core issues, not important issues, even by useless people. When the narcissist goes through mortification, he feels unsafe, disoriented. The whole situation looks nightmarish and surrealistic because his grandiosity impairs his reality testing. He is inside the delusion. He has selective attention. He filters out things. And this renders him dangerously unaware of his environment, gullible to a frightening extent. The narcissist delusionally, for example, considers himself witty or funny, fascinating, authoritative, omniscient, transformative, addictive, irresistible, hyper-intelligent, or hypersexual. And actually, the overwhelming majority of narcissists come across as loathsome, arrogant, fraudulent, foolish, buffoonish, pompous, gullible, sadistic, hurtful, pathetic, creepy, inhuman, and sarcastic. And yet, very few narcissists would use these terms to describe themselves. On the other end of grandiosity, there's paranoia, persecutory delusions. Everyone, especially women, try to deceive me, to manipulate me, to lie to me, and to get away with abusive misbehavior. I am such a treasure. I have so much to give. Everyone wants a piece of me. But actually, people perceive the narcissist as histrionic, as provocative, and they don't respect him, they don't admire him, they are not awed by him, they're not afraid of him. None of this is true. Actually, they loathe the narcissist, they pity him, they deride him, they're exasperated, they ignore the narcissist on many occasions, they often conspire to hurt the narcissist. But they do so in extremes when the narcissist is sadistic or bullying or threatening. And even then, when there is a real conspiracy, a real collusion to hurt the narcissist will fail to notice it because of his grandiosity, cognitive deficit. The thing is that it's all based on cognitive dissonance. When the overt or classic narcissist fails, he rejects reality, he rejects life, and he refuses to accept his responsibility for his own life. He becomes, therefore, covert, in the shadows, hiding, a reflection. So it's rejection which is intended to settle the dissonance, to resolve the dissonance, and to ameliorate the anxiety that comes with dissonance. The narcissist deludes himself that he provides value added. I don't know what, analysis, money, insight, healing, support, succor. He convinces himself that he's so unique that people will never give up on him. Never mind how negativistic, passive-aggressive, sadistic, frustrating, withholding, and hurtful he is. They will never give up on him because what he has to give is unique, can't be found anywhere else, and invaluable, has no price, worth every price, priceless. In reality, the narcissist provides value added that sometimes is a bit unique, but it's not indispensable. It's not irreplaceable. It's definitely not worth the emotional price that people have to pay for his abuse. So people, men and women, give up on the narcissist with alacrity. They go no contact, post haste. People may respect the narcissist for some accomplishments or for his intelligence, but this is also very misleading. It's false advertising because an intelligent, charming, magnetic, charismatic narcissist it implies that he's wise or mature, and narcissists are not wise or mature. When people get to know the narcissist up close, they lose all respect for him. And coupled with their envy and revolt at his obnoxious and pompous personality, it sometimes leads, if they are narcissists, if they are psychopaths, if they are victims of abuse who are vindictive and vengeful, sometimes this confluence of disrespect, envy, and revulsion, leads them to virulent displays of public humiliation, shaming, narcissist shaming, and passive-aggressive or punitive acts, which in turn lead to mortification and collapsed covert state. Such disrespect is also communicable. It's contagious. People catch it from each other, you know? And this contagion is exacerbated by the narcissist's own behaviors. Ironically, when he feigns indifference in a covert state, it increases the incentive and the motivation to hurt him even more, to get through his firewall of apathy. And when he's reactant, when there's reactance and defiance, when he's antisocial or psychopathic, of course you want to put him down like a rabid dog. The apathy of the narcissist in the collapsed covert state is not perceived as a sign of strength, but on the contrary, it's perceived as a doormat's, cowardice, weakness, absence of enforceable boundaries. The narcissist opens himself up to contempt, abuse, and derision exactly by becoming covert. And alternatively, people perceive the narcissist's feigned and ostentatious disinterest as passive aggression. The narcissist's disrespect for and ostentatious disinterest in his intimate partners is interpreted by extension as a lack of dignity, lack of strength, lack of resilience, and lack of self-respect. Who doesn't care for his property, for his intimate partners? Who doesn't protect people he loves? Only a non-entity, zero nobody, you know, a wretch. So similarly, if the narcissist switches from collapsed covert state to a psychopathic, antisocial, defiant, overt narcissistic stage, if he then pendulates, if he swings, if he switches from covert to malignant, his reactance, his defiance, his aggression, they're not perceived as credible. He's about as intimidating and deterring as a spoiled brat, and equally repulsive and antagonizing. It's one of the few points where I fully agree with Jordan Peterson. Nothing more repulsive than a spoiled brat. And the narcissist's conspicuous attempts to man up, to deter, to intimidate, they provoke the offended parties to escalate into egregious territory. Narcissist induces escalation in a war he can never win. People, men and much more so perhaps women, they have very, very little very few strategic options in such cases. They have to become aggressive, and they have to hurt the narcissist. In a way, they have to mortify him. He's like in a daze, in a trance. They have to wake him up. They have to bring him back to reality, screaming and kicking, and there's no other way. He can go into deep space. He's in a trip. He's high on his own grandiosity. Even as a covert, he is high on his own grandiosity, because the covert feigned indifference is a form of grandiosity. I'm indifferent. I don't care. See if I care. I don't mind. You can do anything. Who are you? You can't touch me. It's grandiosity. And so this is the dynamic that the switching from overt to covert provoke. And the inner dialogue of the narcissist, both classic and covert, they share a single template. It's a little like Microsoft Word. With the same software, you can write this novel or that novel. You can write a novel or a poem. With the same template, you get overt classic narcissist and covert. So the dialogue goes like this. People, says the narcissist to himself, men and much more so women, they have very little to offer me. Compared to alternatives like books or films, people bore me to death. They can teach me nothing, of course, nothing relevant or useful, because I know everything. They are wasteful, they're inefficient, they're entitled, they're inflated. In other words, the narcissist projects. He says everyone is a narcissist, Everyone is grandiose. To maximize return on investment, because narcissists like to think in objective terms. They consider themselves optimizing machines, optimizing devices, all-wise, all-knowing robots. And everything is like dictated by ultimate supreme rationality, you know, unless they play the spiritual guru or the public intellectual philosopher psychologist who has all the answers. Unless they play this game, majority of narcissists would pretend to be optimizing machines. So to maximize return on investment, the bottom line in the balance sheet, the narcissist says to himself, I need people to adhere to strict standards and rules and to obey me. It is my way or the highway. Take it or leave it. He's not flexible. And so this insistence on following the narcissist's rules of conduct, has the added bonus of gratifying the narcissist's sadistic impulses, because it frustrates and hurts other people. And that's fun. Frustrating and hurting other people is fun. It's even more fun than sex. And of course, the reality is other people are not inferior to the narcissist. I would even say, as a general rule, the overwhelming vast majority of people are way superior to the narcissist in almost every conceivable way, perhaps with the exception of intelligence or intellect in some isolated cases. Narcissist is deficient, cognitively deficient, emotionally non-existent, is as clueless in social situations and in sex as the most autistic person. Women cheat on the narcissist because as he is not lovable. And this creates in them a frustrating and infuriating, tantalizing dissonance. They love an unlovable person. Additionally, the shared fantasy of the narcissist is an extension of his creepy and sick mind. And so men equally reject the narcissist because of this incongruence, lack of cohesion and coherence between what he promises and what he shows, the appearance and the substance, or actually the lack of substance. There's nobody there. It's a zero in the fullest sense of the word, not as a value judgment, but as a mathematical description. The narcissist is a zero. There's nobody there. And when a woman cheats on the narcissist tells himself, how could she have chosen? How could she have opted for such an inferior man? Look at me. I'm intelligent, I'm irresistible, I'm handsome, I'm rich, I'm powerful. How could she have, ended up with him? They don't understand that other men, regardless of how they look or behave by comparison, are a breath of fresh air. They bring normalcy into the life of the narcissist's intimate partner. His abuse creates claustrophobic, suffocating, hypervigilant bubble with no atmosphere. He sucks the oxygen out of every environment. Women don't perceive the narcissist's absence in their lives after the breakup as a punishment or a loss. They perceive it as wonderful liberation, as a relief, as a reward. Of course, his intimate partners miss some aspects. Some narcissists are very insightful, so they miss maybe the psychological insights. Other narcissists are reasonably good lovers. They miss the sex. You always miss something in someone. So generally, most intimate partners would miss something, but largely and overwhelmingly, they are relieved. They are relieved. They are liberated. They're happy. They're happy to have gotten rid of the narcissist and his sick shared fantasy. They are much happier. They're much happier when the narcissist is away. And even when they are together, ostensibly, they try to avoid the narcissist. And all women, if the narcissist allows them closure or closure dialogue, they compile these long and exhaustive lists of the narcissist's shortcomings, deficiencies, disadvantages, etc., etc. And these lists are very, very, very long, almost interminable, almost endless. So this by itself proves that all other men alternatives are vastly superior to the narcissist and way more attractive to his intimate partners. See, what the narcissist fails to understand is that women first connect to a man as a person, and they want a person who loves to be with people, or more specifically, loves women. They want someone who is kind, who is interesting, who is passionate, who is horny. They want openness, gregariousness. They want safe acceptance, succor, a good time. So they end up being with other men. And what I'm saying here applies to business as well. It applies to the workplace. Applies to organizations the narcissist belongs to. I don't know, church, political party. People want people. People want human beings. People want persons to be with. They don't want to be with pale and dysfunctional and glitchy imitation of humans, like the narcissist. Other people allow for intimacy to develop patiently and attentively. And so when the narcissist's intimate partner betrays him, cheats on him with another man, it's because they see in that other man, the person. And this is the foundation of sexual attraction. Women are attracted to other men because of the person, the personality. The sex is a derivative. Many narcissists are functional schizoids. In other words, even if they socialize a lot, they don't really socialize. They are averse to people. They hate men, they hate women, they hate children, they hate humanity. Except when and for as long as other people are of some use to the narcissist. I don't know, give him supply, money, access, sex, services. In this sense, all narcissists are very psychopathic. They are out to get narcissistic supply, and it's a goal, and that's they will instrumentally use other people to obtain this goal. But otherwise, they're very averse to humanity. And this applies to people of the opposite sex. Sex is not a sufficient compensation as far as the narcissist is concerned. Anyhow, narcissists never have sex. Women are no exception. They are useful to the narcissist as in his pursuit of sadism, to despoil them, to degrade them, to humiliate them. They're useful to him to provide him with services. The 3 S's: supply, services, sadistic sex. He's willing to invest in order to extract benefits, but only when there is an immediate, specific, and high return on his investment. Instant gratification, entitlement, or one of the other goals that I mentioned. And with women, the investment horizon is longer. Women demand reciprocity in some respects, sexually, emotionally, time-wise. And so women also tend to taper off their sex, their supply, and even services. So it's a bargain. And if the bargain is not kept, women end up being with other men. They cheat and deceive. When the investment tap the faucet is closed, or when there is asymmetry or imbalance. And the narcissist's intimate partner could even end up with other men who are as abusive, grandiose, entitled, or sadistic as the narcissist is. But these men give them something: attention, succor, money, children, stability, reliability, goals, sex, good time, socializing, something. The narcissist only takes. Even the narcissist's sex is autoerotic, sadistic, using the woman's body. There's no reciprocity there. Narcissists can give insights. Narcissists can be entertaining. But even these can be overbearing, meandering, compulsive, pompous, wrong, aggressive, sadistic, and ultimately he degenerates into unwanted rants, ramblings. He's too much. the narcissist is a caricature of a human being. It's too much, too emphasized. And so when a woman has to make the comparison between the narcissist and any other man, I mean, narcissists usually end up losing the game. And I'm again mentioning sexual exclusivity and interpersonal relationships because this is the most intense domain of human life. It's where everything is revealed. There's maximum intimacy, maximum emotions, primordial and contemporary, civilized, bodily and mental, intellectual and emotional, cognitive and feelings. I mean, everything is there. It's a microcosm and a macrocosm. It's the cosmos itself. The workplace has a subset of these features. Friendship has another subset of these features. But only an intimate relationship with an intimate partner, an interpersonal, prolonged interaction, only there the true face of everyone involved gets revealed. And only there the narcissist can transition via mortification from one self-state to another, from overt to covert, and from covert to overt. And now to round it up, to sum it up, I want to discuss the issue of whether anyone is preferable to the narcissist. Because this seems to be the behavior of the narcissist's intimate partners, the narcissist's business partners, the narcissist's friends. They all seem to give up on the narcissist and then proceed to develop relationships, sometimes instant relationships, sometimes one-night relationships with perfect strangers. Does it make sense? If you have known the narcissist for years, does it make sense for you to replace him with a total stranger overnight? If you have worked with the narcissist for years, does it make sense for you to dump the narcissist and start something with someone totally new? And the answer is yes. It's a rational choice. Consider, for example, dating a perfect stranger. When you're dating a perfect stranger, there is a 1 to 3% chance of ending up with a narcissist or a psychopath. 1 to 3% of a population are narcissists and psychopaths. So when you are with a stranger, that's your chance. These are your chances. But when you are with a narcissist or a psychopath, you are 100% guaranteed to be with a narcissist or a psychopath. So it's much better to take the odds of 3% than to take the odds of 100%. It is rational to trust and to take chances with strangers and not with the narcissist or the psychopath. And it's wrong to think that spending time with a narcissist, having a relationship with the narcissist, having a previous acquaintance with the narcissist, regardless of length and intensity, should change this calculus. Because it doesn't. First of all, the psychopathic narcissist is a pathological liar, so his self-reporting is very suspect. Can't learn much by spending time with you. And second thing, from the very first moment, he abuses, lies, tortures, manipulates openly throughout any relationship, business, personal. So you gain nothing by spending time with the narcissist. You gain nothing. Narcissism is a guarantee of ultimate loss and abuse. Why take the chances? So this is what I wanted to tell you, that there is no type constancy. Narcissists switch from classic to covert when they go through collapse and mortification. They switch back from covert to overt when they go again through collapse and mortification. And I wanted to reassure you, as victims of narcissists, survivors of narcissistic abuse, or people who contemplate being in relationship with narcissists, or exposed to people you suspect are narcissists, it's very rational to walk away. And it's very rational to prefer even relationships, even one-night stands, even dating, even with perfect strangers, than with the narcissist you know. Because you don't know. There's no such thing as knowing the narcissist. I just demonstrated to you that narcissists have self-states, exactly like borderlines, exactly like people with dissociative identity disorder. There's nobody there, and because there's nobody there, anyone can be there, and everyone is there. The narcissist you think you know can suddenly experience narcissistic injury, mortification, a collapse, and he becomes covert. And that's a narcissist you don't know. Surreptitious, undermining, underground, passive-aggressive, maliciously dangerous. And then he goes back to being overt via another collapse, another mortification, and you have a grandiose abuser with sadistic overtones. Why do you need this? Why do you need any of this? No contact. In 1995, I suggested a coherent strategy of no contact in a series of papers. The no contact strategy is not simply going no contact. It has dozens of steps of what you should do to ascertain that you are in a real no contact state. And I encourage you to watch the videos on my channel which deal with no contact. These transitions, it's a new way of looking at the narcissistic dynamic, but it doesn't really add any meaningful insight to the question, doesn't really provide a new answer to the question, should I be with him or not? Not.
To be a narcissist is a full-time job. The narcissist needs to secure narcissistic supply on an ongoing basis, exactly like a junkie has to secure his next fix. Without narcissistic supply, the narcissist crumbles. It's a full-time job, it's energy depleting, and many narcissists do not have the skills, talents, or qualifications to obtain supply. They are the collapsed narcissist. And today, I would like to discuss the collapsed narcissist and a new concept I have come up with, the collapsed histrionic. My name is Сэм Вакнин, and I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. Pathological narcissism is thought to be the result of a prolonged period of severe abuse by primary caregivers, or by peers, or authority figures. In this sense, pathological narcissism is a reaction to trauma. It's a post-traumatic condition. Narcissism is a form of post-traumatic stress disorder that got ossified and fixated and mutated into a personality disorder. All narcissists are traumatized. All narcissists suffer from a variety of post-traumatic syndromes, such as abandonment anxiety, reckless behaviors, and other anxiety disorders, mood disorders, somatoform disorders, body image problems, and so on. But the presenting signs of narcissism rarely indicate post-trauma. This is because pathological narcissism is an efficient coping defense mechanism. It's adaptive. The narcissist presents to the world a facade of invincibility, equanimity, superiority, skillfulness, cool-headedness, invulnerability, nonchalance, and in short, indifference. This front that the narcissist presents to the world is penetrated in times of great crisis that threaten the narcissist's ability to obtain narcissistic supply. It is also breached and collapses when narcissistic supply is spurious, fake, or low grade, negative, or static. And then the narcissist becomes a collapsed
narcissist. Many self-styled experts online use the term failed narcissist, but it's a failed term. It's a mistake. Failed narcissist is a term that was invented by Grotstein, a scholar, to describe one of the phases in the development of borderline personalities. The correct term is collapsed narcissist. The collapsed narcissist is very much like the collapsed histrionic. The collapsed histrionic is usually a woman with body image, somatoform issues, and a low sense of self-worth. Yet, she still needs men, and she uses men to regulate her flagging self-esteem and deficient self-confidence. This creates a permanent dissonance and anticipatory anxiety, as such a woman expects fully to be rejected and humiliated by men. Low self-esteem often leads to an impaired reality test. The collapsed histrionic misreads environmental, social, and sexual cues. She often ends up being mocked, shunned, abused, or sexually assaulted by men. She compensates for her insecurities with brazen defiance and grandiosity, as well as with substance abuse, alcoholism, all of which compound her ability to properly gauge reality. The collapsed histrionic's feelings of inferiority and inadequacy lead the collapsed histrionic to social withdrawal and to reclusiveness. She rarely dates men, and when she does, she aggresses against, pushes away, and abuses alpha males, winners, accomplished men, even when they are genuinely interested in her. She engages in preemptive abandonment. She dumps them before they dump her. Instead, the collapsed histrionic picks up safe beta males, weak, ugly losers who are very unlikely to painfully reject her. Both histrionics and narcissists require a form of narcissistic supply. And when the narcissistic supply is deficient, when it's missing, they resort to several adaptive solutions. The first solution is the delusional narrative solution. The narcissist or histrionic construct a narrative in which he figures as the hero, brilliant, perfect, irresistibly handsome or beautiful, destined for great things, entitled, powerful, wealthy, the center of attention, etc. The bigger the strain on this delusional charade, the greater the gap between fantasy and reality, the grandiosity gap, the more the delusion coalesces and solidifies. Finally, if the delusion is sufficiently protracted in time, it replaces reality. And the histrionic and the collapsed histrionic and narcissist reality test deteriorates considerably. He or she withdraw the bridges, may become schizotypal, catatonic, or schizoid. Another solution is the antisocial solution. The narcissist or histrionic renounce reality. To the narcissist or histrionic's mind, those who pusillanimously fail to recognize his unbounded talents, his innate superiority, his overarching brilliance, his benevolent nature, her stunning beauty, entitlement, cosmically important mission, perfection, etc., etc. Anyone who fails to recognize the real foundations of the narcissist or histrionic's grandiosity, they don't deserve consideration. The narcissist's natural affinity with the criminal, the lack of empathy and compassion, deficient social skills, disregard for social laws and morals, they are also common to the histrionic. Both narcissists and histrionics have a psychopathic overlay. Actually, many scholars claim that histrionic personality disorder is the female variant of psychopathy, antisocial personality disorder. And all this complex, all this antisocial, defiant brew erupts and blossoms. The rejected narcissist, the rejected histrionic, becomes a full-fledged antisocial, sociopath or psychopath. He or she ignores the wishes and needs of others, breaks the law, violates all rights, natural and legal, holds people in contempt and disdain, derides and decries society and its codes, punishes the ignorant ingrates, and transgresses on the emotions and rights of even loved ones. That, to his or her mind, these people drove him or her to this state. They are guilty. They are responsible for her or his acts. By acting criminally and by jeopardizing their safety, lives, and property, the narcissist, the collapsed narcissist or the collapsed histrionic exacts vengeance, reciprocates, restores balance and justice. It's a power play within a power matrix. A variant of this pattern of conduct is the passive-aggressive solution. Passive aggressiveness wears a multitude of guises: procrastination, malingering, perfectionism, forgetfulness, neglect, truancy, intentional inefficiency, stubbornness, and outright sabotage. This repeated and advertent misconduct has far-reaching effects. Consider the negativist in the workplace. He or she invests time and efforts in obstructing their own chores and in undermining relationships. But these self-destructive and self-defeating behaviors wreak havoc throughout the workshop or the office. Same in romantic relationships. Despite the obstructive role they play, passive-aggressives feel unappreciated, bored, cheated, and misunderstood. Left out, they chronically complain, whine,
carp, and criticize. They blame their failures and defeats on others, posing as martyrs and victims of a corrupt, inefficient, and heartless system, or corrupt, inefficient, and heartless people. In other words, they have alloplastic defenses and an external locus of control. Passive-aggressives sulk and give the silent treatment in reaction to real or imaginary slights. They suffer from ideas of reference, referential ideation. They believe that they are the butt of derision, contempt, and condemnation. They are mildly paranoid. The world is out to get them, which explains their personal misfortune, or they are being purposefully left out and cut out. In the words of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, they may be sullen, irritable, impatient, argumentative, cynical, skeptical, and contrary. Rageful and spiteful, they are also hostile, explosive, they lack impulse control, and they are sometimes reckless. The next solution to deficient narcissistic supply, the next solution commonly adopted by collapsed narcissists and histrionics, is the paranoid schizoid solution. When narcissism fails as a defense mechanism, the narcissist develops paranoid narratives, self-directed confabulations, which place him at the center of others' allegedly malign attention and intention. The narcissist becomes his own audience and self-sufficient as his own, sometimes exclusive source of narcissistic supply. The narcissist develops persecutory delusions. He perceives slights and insults where none were intended. Collapsed narcissists and collapsed histrionics are hypervigilant. The narcissist or histrionic becomes subject to referential ideation. People are gossiping about her, mocking him, prying into his affairs, cracking her emails, etc., etc. The narcissist and histrionic become convinced that he or she is the center of malign and malintentioned attention. People are conspiring to humiliate her, punish him, abscond with his property, delude her, impoverish him, confine her physically or intellectually, censor him, impose on her time, force him to action or to inaction, frighten her, coerce him, surround and besiege her, change his mind, part with her values, victimize or even murder her, ignore her, cut her out, leave her aside, etc., etc. Some narcissists withdraw completely from the world, populated with such minacious and ominous objects. They are really projections of internal objects and processes to secondary objects. These collapsed narcissists and histrionics avoid all social contact except the most necessary. They refrain from meeting people, from falling in love, from having sex, from encouraging intimacy, from talking to others, or even from corresponding with them. In short, they become schizoids, not out of social shyness or social anxiety, but out of what they feel to be their choice. This evil, hopeless world does not deserve me. goes the inner refrain, and I shall waste none of my time and resources on it. The next solution is the paranoid, aggressive, or explosive solution. Other narcissists who develop persecutory delusions, histrionics with the same, resort to an aggressive stance, a more violent resolution of their internal conflict. They become verbally, psychologically, situationally, and very rarely physically abusive. They insult, castigate, chastise, berate, demean, and deride their nearest and dearest, often well-wishers, often loved ones. These narcissists and histrionics explode in unprovoked displays of indignation, righteousness, spite, condemnation, and blame. Theirs is the exegetic bedlam. They interpret everything, even the most innocuous, inadvertent, and innocent comment, as designed to provoke and humiliate them. They sow fear, revulsion, hate, and malignant envy. They flail against the windmills of reality, a pathetic, forlorn sight for sure. But often they cause real and lasting damage. They hurt people. And sometimes they hurt themselves. The next solution is the masochistic avoidance solution. The collapsed narcissist and collapsed histrionic is angered by the lack of narcissistic supply or attention or admiration or being desired. The collapsed narcissist and collapsed histrionic directs some of his or her fury inwards, punishing himself or herself for his or her failure. This masochistic behavior has the added benefit of forcing the narcissist or the histrionic's closest to assume the roles of dismayed spectators of or persecutors, and thus either way to pay him the attention that he craves. So he forces people around him to observe what's happening and to pity him or to pity her, or to persecute him or her. Self-administered punishment often manifests as self-handicapping masochism, a narcissistic or histrionic cop-out. By undermining his work, her relationship, and his efforts, the increasingly fragile narcissist and histrionic avoids additional criticism and censure, negative supply. Self-inflicted failure is the narcissist or the histrionic's doing, and thus proves that he or she is the master of his or her own fate. Masochistic narcissists keep finding themselves in self-defeating circumstances, which render success impossible, and an objective assessment of their performance improbable, to quote Theodore Millen. They act carelessly, withdraw in mid-effort, are constantly fatigued, bored, or disaffected, and thus passive-aggressively sabotage their lives. Their suffering is defiant, and by deciding to abort, they reassert their omnipotence. The collapsed narcissist and histrionic's pronounced and public misery and self-pity are compensatory. Again, Theodore Millen says, they are intended to reinforce his or her self-esteem against overwhelming convictions of worthlessness. The collapsed narcissist and histrionic's tribulations and anguish render him or her, in his or her eyes, unique, saintly, virtuous, righteous, resilient, and significant. They are, in other words, self-generated narcissistic supply. Thus, paradoxically, the worse the anguish and unhappiness of the collapsed narcissist or the collapsed histrionic, the more relieved and elated such a narcissist or histrionic feels. It feels good to feel bad. In extremis, when all these default behaviors and solutions fail, or when only negative, fake, low-grade, and static narcissistic supply is to be had, the collapsed narcissist or histrionic falls apart in a process of disintegration known as decompensation. It's the inability to maintain psychological defenses in the face of overwhelming and mounting stress. And this is accompanied by the next stage, which is acting out. It's when an inner conflict, most often frustration, translates into aggression. It involves acting with little or no insight or reflection, and in order to attract attention and disrupt other people's cozy lives. The dynamic forces which render the narcissist and the histrionic paralyzed and fake, his or her vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and fears, these are starkly exposed as his or her defenses crumble and become dysfunctional. The narcissist or histrionic's extreme dependence on his or her social milieu for the regulation of his or her sense of self-worth is painfully and pitifully evident as he or she is reduced to begging and cajoling or to threatening. At such times, the collapsed narcissist or the collapsed histrionic act self-destructively and antisocially. The mask of superior equanimity is pierced by displays of impotent rage, self-loathing, self-pity, passive aggressiveness, and crass attempts at manipulation of friends, family, loved ones, and colleagues. The narcissist, collapsed narcissist, or collapsed histrionic's ostensible benevolence and caring evaporate suddenly and shockingly. The mask falls. Evil erupts and emanates, or maliciousness. The collapsed narcissist and collapsed histrionic seek to destroy the source of frustration, to punish it, to punish loved ones, to ruin other people's lives, to cause enormous emotional havoc and anguish and pain. The collapsed narcissist and collapsed histrionic feel caged and threatened, and they react with, as any animal would do, by striking back at their perceived tormentors, at their hitherto nearest and dearest. There is no sight on God's given earth more unsettling than this transition from caring, empathic, loving, tender person, the acting, from acting to acting out, the vicious, cornered, malicious animal that strikes out at anyone and everyone around her and causes the maximum possible damage, pain, and blood, both figurative and literal.